Hi there, today I want to tell you how we got to know that our son has HLHS. And before we start, I just wanted to tell you I have no clue how to film, so please be kind about it and also be kind about my language skills, because I decided to talk to you in English to reach more people than I would with my native language, but that also means I'm going to miss some terminology and I'm sorry for that, and also for the grammar stuff and everything else. It's okay. So, how we got to know that our son has HLHS, so hypoplastic left heart syndrome, or missing one half of his heart, to say it in an easier way, as basically we got to know 2 days after he was born. He stopped breastfeeding, and that didn't concern us too much because our daughter also stopped breastfeeding shortly after she was born, so we kind of knew that, and we were still concerned, so that's why we called our midwife. We were at home and our midwife came almost right away, and she basically saved his life and is basically our hero. Okay, so to begin, I told you he stopped breastfeeding, and that's not typical. So when our midwife came, she checked his oxygen levels again, because she did it on the day before and it was in a okay area. So it was, I think it was 96 the first time, and the second time when she came that day it was 100% sure. So she was a little bit relieved. We didn't know what it was for, so we asked her and she told us that it was for heart problems, and because he had 100%, nobody thought, okay, it could be a heart problem. After that he threw up, so the milk he had left in his stomach came out again, and we tried to force feed him basically, and it worked, but she told us he doesn't look too well because there were 3 things with his breathing that weren't okay. He used his help muscles, I don't know how to call them, so he used different muscles that helped him breathe, and he had 2 kinds of noises while he was breathing, and she was like, that doesn't look good, it might be an infection, so just go to the hospital right away. So we left everything at home, and basically also our daughter, because we were just going to get her back from my mother, and we were like, oh, take her again and go off, and she did, and it was really great. So we rushed to the hospital, and there they basically immediately took us in and put us into a room, and I tried to breastfeed him again, and it kind of worked, and they were like, okay, then we give you 5 minutes and we're going to check on him. After 5 minutes they came back, and he tried to drink but couldn't really do it, so clearly there was something wrong. And the nurse we had, I really hated her, because she started to say, I don't like him. And that was for me a red flag, because I was a mother, he was a newborn baby, and I thought he was really, really nice and perfect, and I was so happy about him, and she was like, I don't like him, and she repeated it over and over again. And of course, in my rational brain, I knew she meant there is something wrong with him. But that wasn't what came to me at that moment. It was more like, oh, I hate him, he's bad. And I was like, just give him back, that's okay, you can give it to me, I like him. So then he threw up, and they were like, no, we are not going to do this here in the emergency room, we're going to put him to the neonatal care. And so they rushed us off to the neonatal care, which took 5 minutes. Oh, by the way, from our home to the hospital, it also only took us 10-15 minutes because we live close by. Yes, so we went to the neonatal care, and there they put him into a room, got a lot of doctors and everybody, and he screamed. He just screamed because everybody was around him and I couldn't hold him anymore. They took him basically from me and put him into one of these little beds. And I tried to stay there, but basically they shushed us out, and for me it felt like I tried to resist them maybe 15 minutes, but probably it was more like 5. I saw how they started to tie him down, and it's just really traumatic and it wasn't really nice. And so after they hushed me out of the room, I was like, what the heck can I do? And because I already breastfed him, I had a lot of milk, or I felt my breasts were heavy, and it was like, okay, where are the pumping machines? And so they showed me where they were, and I felt like a cow because there were several machines in a row with sitting places, and not the nicest thing, but okay. So I pumped milk and gave it to the sisters, of course, no, to the nurses. And after that, I joined my husband to sit in a corner, and maybe half an hour later, we were really depressed and crying, and everything was awful. A nurse came to us and told us, okay, they're going to check him. The first thing they checked was his head, so basically his brain, and she told us there's nothing wrong with his brain. And I was like, yeah, he's not disabled, not mentally disabled. That's one big thing for me, and I know it sounds really awful, and I don't mean anybody harm who has a mentally disabled child or any person who's mentally disabled. I don't know what it feels like, but for me it was in that moment just a big relief. So maybe 10 more minutes, another nurse came out and was like, okay, the next thing they checked was his heart, and they found a hole in his heart, and they are going to look if that's what causing him to shut down. I was like, okay, that doesn't sound good, but it's only a hole, so probably they can fix it. And we were still crying and everything, but it was more like, okay, it's his heart, but they probably or hopefully find that's nothing severe. So after I think 5 or 10 more minutes, the nurse came again and was like, okay, we know what is happening with your child. A doctor will be here in 5 minutes and explain it to you, basically. We're like, okay, that doesn't sound good. And when the doctor came, it was not nice to hear, but he was really calm and explained really well to us what HLHS is. So he basically explained the whole thing about you have two sides of a heart, chambers, sorry, 2 heart chambers, and he first explained the healthy heart, so that one chamber is for the lung system and one chamber is for the body system, blood system, and afterwards he explained that one of the chambers is missing. Oh, wrong one. So he only had a chamber for his lung system, but not for his body system. That's why it's HLHS. If you have the chamber for your heart, for the body blood system, then it's HRHS, but HLHS is more common. When I heard that diagnosis, I was like, he's going to die, because I know a little bit about anatomy, and that just didn't work for me. And I was so glad that the doctor told us, okay, we can do something about it. It's not going to last him for forever, but at least now we can do something about it, and there is a way to treat it. And I don't know if he started to explain the first operation to us or not, but at least he gave us a little bit hope. Yeah, basically that's the story of how we got to know about HLHS. After that, we got transferred to another hospital where they specialized in hearts, and there's also a special section for people with born heart diseases, which is HLHS. Yes, that's our story, and it really felt awful, and we cried a lot, especially I cried a lot. And we also, on the next day when they stabilized him, gave us a choice, and I don't know if that's normal in other countries, but in Germany, if you have a child with HLHS, they might diagnose us while you're still pregnant. If they do, you have the choice if you want to abort or not. And that's true for the whole pregnancy. Normally in Germany, there are several cases where, or if you have a pregnancy you don't want, there's a time frame between when you can abort. And there are only really a few things where they allow you to abort at any time during the pregnancy. So I could have been at week 36 and they would still allow me to abort the child if I wouldn't have wanted him. And because we didn't have that choice, the day after we got to know that he has HLHS, they asked us if we want to do the operations. And that was a really hard question for us, because which mother wants to have a choice to have a child or don't have a child? Yeah, you obviously know the answer to the question for our case, because we decided to have him. And what was also really hard for us, what we only read afterwards, so when we went home for the first time after the first hospital stay, we got a letter. I don't know when that one arrived, because you get a description of what happened in the hospital sometimes a month later. And when I read the report, that was the first time I heard that he was reanimated during the first day, or during the day we got to know that he has HLHS, and we didn't know how close it was basically. And I think either we tried to push it away so that our minds didn't really notice everything that happened, or they just didn't tell us, which I also would understand because we were in a lot of distress. Okay, I don't know what way is better to get to know that you have HLHS, if it is during pregnancy, which gives you more options, because there's an option, an experimental option, where they try to open the bloodstream through the heart to the heart chamber that isn't circulated basically, and most of them result in miscarriages, but at least they try to help the children. And I wouldn't know, or I don't believe that in our case that would have worked, because there's a gradients of HLHS, and we have one of the most severe ones. So when they do the first operation, there are 3 operations, and when they do the first one, they shut the heart chamber completely off, so that there's no blood going through it. And with our son, they didn't have to do it because it was already shut totally. And there are also cases where it isn't shut totally, and there are also cases that are basically the lucky ones that have a blood flow through the heart, and in some cases the heart doesn't develop normal, but it develops enough basically. Okay, but those are way too more topics right now. I started to cut, and I hope you learned a little bit about it, and I hope I could give you a little bit of hope for whatever lies ahead. That's basically it. Bye.